Welcome to another video lecture in the Pre-Minor Leadership course. In this video lecture, I will discuss chapter 12 of the book as we will talk about strategic leadership. Earlier in this course, we have defined leadership as an ability to influence a group towards the achievements of goals. And we have addressed such leadership at the individual, dyadic, and group level. In this video lecture, we will finally discuss also leadership at the organizational level. We're talking about leadership at the organizational level, as strategic leadership focuses more on the survival of the organization as a whole. While much of the earlier work on leadership, and actually all the literature that we have discussed so far in this chapter, focus more on middle managers, when we're talking about strategic leadership, we focus on top executives of organizations. So the top of the top. The highest level leaders in organizations. And these leaders, they don't focus necessarily on a specific set of employees or increasing the performance of specific employees or a specific group of employees. Instead, they focus on the long-term success and survival of the organization as a whole. And in this video lecture, I will discuss 5 determinants of organizational performance that these strategic leaders should engage in order for the performance of the whole organization to strive. So here the first one is adaptation to the environment. They should be efficient and focus on process reliability. They need to focus on human capital and strategic human research management. They need to address a competitive strategy. And finally, they can engage in management programs, systems, and structures. So each of these 5 determinants of organizational performance, I will discuss in this video lecture by providing an example for each of those. So the first one, adaptation to the environment. So a strategic leader who focuses on the long-term success of the organization as a whole needs to be able to adapt to the environment. If something happens within the context, they need to react to that. And of course, a key example that we have recently seen is that organizations needed to adapt to the COVID-19 crisis. This impacted a lot of companies, and especially the top executives needed to decide, how are we going to handle this? And in the book, they describe an example of a family-owned fish and chips takeaway restaurant in the UK. And they were in a lot of trouble initially when COVID-19 hit. Although it was a takeaway restaurant, you could understand that maybe that would be a good thing for them. But actually, at first, they were kind of in a crisis organizationally as well, because due to the COVID-19 crisis, they were unable to obtain fish and other ingredients for their menu. Obviously, a disaster. But what this top executive at this particular company, Chris, did is that he brought 5 of his competitors together so that they could place larger orders and keep their chains of supplies. So they were still able to buy all of the ingredients they needed. This is a way in which a strategic leader focuses on the long-term success of the organizations and efficiently adapts to a crisis in the environment. By the words of Chris, the top executive of this specific example, in times of crisis, looking for workarounds, solutions, even if that means dealing with your competitors to find some form of advantage, is worth the effort. Okay, let's look at the second one. The second one in which leaders can determine the strategy of their organizations and thereby focus on the long-term success of these organizations is by increasing the efficiency of their organization and by increasing process reliability. Well, if we're talking about efficiency, a key example of a company that really focused on this strategy of making their company more efficient is Ryanair. I think most of you, all of you probably, will be familiar with this airline. This airline really focused on being more efficient and thereby being able to offer the cheapest flights. So what they did was a kind of a strategic decision by the top executives of this company to reduce costs and by doing so gain a competitive advantage. And actually they have been very successful by engaging in this specific strategy. So what they do is they bargain power over suppliers to keep their operating costs low. They have little aircraft variety, so they often use the same aircrafts. They have a lot of negotiation power with airport operators, and they have a lack of differentiation of services. So all the services are very simple and similar. So this is all very strategic decisions that are made by the top executives of these organizations. So this is a form of successful strategic leadership which focuses on increasing the efficiency of the organization and thereby improving the success of the organization in the long term. Let's look at the third example. The third example in which leaders can engage in strategic leadership is by focusing on their human capital and engaging in what we call strategic HRM, human resource management. So it focuses particularly again on the employees, but on all the employees of the organizations by installing certain rules, resources that their employees can benefit from. So what organizations, for instance, at Starbucks is a good example of an organization that really increased the human capital. And they did it by the following examples. They can increase, for instance, employee skills. You can increase employee skills, for instance, by having a very good recruitment, selection, and/or training. You want to increase very much employee motivation, inspiring vision, incentives, rewards, and by increasing also employee work design. You can, for instance, think of flexible work or enhancing teamwork. As I said, Starbucks is a key example of a company that really invested in increasing the human capital of their organization. So they really focused on increasing the skills, motivation, and work design for their employees. Here you can click this link where the CEO of Starbucks quickly talks about his vision on increasing the human capital at Starbucks. A next example of a determinant of organizational performance that strategic leaders should engage in is that they need to think of gaining a competitive advantage to their competitors. So they need to engage in some kind of competitive strategy. What type of products will you offer? What will you sell? How will you sell it? To whom do you sell it? How do you get financial resources? These are all kinds of questions that determine the competitive strategy of the organization. And of course, this is something that leaders get to decide as well. And again, as you can understand, this is not the middle manager who decides this, but it's really the top executives of these organizations. Here is an example of Dr. Dre, a hip hop star, as the paper announces, as the article says, who has been very successful, particularly with engaging in this competitive strategy. Finally, if we're talking about strategic leadership, what leaders can do to increase the performance of their organizations is by investing in so-called management program. So what they could do is they could implement cost reduction programs. So they could downsize, fire a lot of people, or outsource, give some of their work to others. They can improve the quality of their work. They can install appraisal programs. They can install innovation programs, etc., etc., etc. We will discuss this a little bit further in the video lecture when we talk about the change process. So far, for now, it's only important to notice that these management programs generally are not very successful, often because they are irrelevant, or even if they're relevant, they're often poorly implemented, or, and that's also very important, not in line with the values of the organizations. So if an executive leader thinks of very interesting things, but it doesn't fit with the rest of the organization, it still doesn't work. In fact, it could actually have unintended side effects, so that it actually has a negative effect overall. So some of the negative side effects are illustrated in this very pretty famous example. It's a US example of an organization called the Home Depot. And what happened here is that Home Depot got a new CEO, and he thought, you know, what I'm going to focus on is cutting costs. So he installed this cost reduction program. And he wanted to do this cutting of costs by centralizing the purchasing decisions. So this means that he limited the number of available items on sale. So Home Depot was very known for like selling everything that you could want. And what he decided is we need to be more efficient. So we limit the number of available items and we use more part-time employees instead of a lot of permanent staff. So what he wanted to do was increase efficiency to reduce the cost. But actually what happened was that these changes made the job of store manager much less appealing. So it wasn't a lot of fun anymore to work there. So what he decreased actually was the human capital, right? So this is one of the other determinants of performance. So where you could focus on increasing one of these determinants, at the same time you often also reduce another. In this case, it wasn't a good idea because actually it resulted in a decline of sales and a decline in stock values as well. So overall, the key takeaways of this video lecture on strategic leadership is that strategic leadership focuses on long-term success and survival of organizations. So strategic leadership is not something that middle managers engage in, but it's something that is engaged in by top executives of organizations. And they focus on the long-term success and survival of the full organization. Second, and finally, I would like to stress that leaders, by engaging in these determinants of organizational performance, influence the overall organizational culture. And this overall organizational culture, in turn, can influence leadership.